There's one recurring topic that comes up in my conversation with various candidates, and that conversation is around whether you should or you shouldn't make things up in a job interview. And to be honest with you, I mean, who am I to tell you what to do in your own job interview? But what I can do is talk a little bit of my experience with these things and maybe give you a little bit of a perspective here. So the first thing I would like you to consider in such an approach is that the number one challenge for a company, what they fear the most in any new hire, is for that employee to be a toxic employee. And by a toxic employee, this doesn't mean they don't have the skills required to do the job, but it means they have the skills. In often cases, they are overqualified, but they are not performing as expected in a team environment, and more often than not, they're not being sincere about these things. So this is the number one problem that they screen you on. And for this, HR people are actually trained to spot these things. And the second aspect that I would like you to consider here is that if you would have a conversation with a friend and try to make up a story for any question that you choose, chances are quite high that you will sound as making up that story. Right? So it's, I guess my point here is that it's very few people that are actually really good with these things. The next point, the third point I wanted to make here is that what actually happens in a real interview is not that people make entire stories by themselves, but what really happens in job interviews is that people make things up when they feel under pressure in a follow-up question. To give an example, for a time when you had to deal with a particularly difficult customer, or a time when you refused or said no to a customer. For example, if you be a financial analyst and your customer would ask you reports on a constant basis, and all of a sudden you realize that, hey, what if I just build a website, to provide those reports automatically to them, so they don't have to, ask that to me all the time. So for this, I presented the website to the customer, and everything went smoothly. And the follow-up question to this would be, okay, but so you refused to do the report on the spot to the customer, and in turn you took your time to build the website. How did the customer respond to this? And here is, where the candidate would say, oh, well, actually, I didn't refuse the customer, but I actually, between two of their requests for reports, I took the time to build the website and actually deliver it. You see, so the original question was the time when you refused or said no to a customer. And right now the customer, the candidate is sort of sugarcoating and making things up to say, hey, I didn't actually said no to him, I did it in my free time. Right? So this is an example where you would crash during an interview and you would tend to make things up. Right? Or for a skilled interviewer, it would immediately come across that you're not confident in yourself. And definitely, you don't seem like the right candidate for the job. And put yourself in your interviewer's shoes. Why would they risk their job with, or their reputation there, by hiring someone that they don't trust in? And this is, one of the main reasons why people go through so many interviewing rounds these days, especially behavioral interviews, because they want to spot such behaviors. So I guess my point here, long story short, was that, usually when you make things up when you're under pressure, more likely, it's not as if you make entire stories up. That rarely happens. So by employing this, and this brings me to my next point, is if you tend to make things up once, chances are this will be a pattern throughout the interview, and probably even further, to make things up on a consistent basis. Because think about it, whenever you will be challenged, your reflex will not be to think how to answer best the question, but rather how to make things up so your answer will sound the best possible way. And this, actually increases the chances of you getting caught with these things. So so to give an overall final set of conclusions here. So it's not about making entire stories up during an interview. I think that would be highly improbable and feasible, and that would be representative of someone who really don't know what they're doing and wouldn't work out at all. But rather, when you go step by step with falling into the trap of making things up for the sake of a great answer, which is the real challenge in a job interview, my advice would be here to also consider the fact that a behavioral interview especially is not expected to be a perfect interview. There's no such thing as a perfect behavioral interview for 6 rounds in a row. If that would happen, it means that your interviewers would be weak interviewers in the first place. It's their job to get you out of your comfort zone to see how you would react, right? It's possible that you have a terrible answer to a question and an exceptional answer to other question, and you would still land the job with that company. But the main thing is to understand that you should focus on giving the best possible answers on how you really believe they would look like, so you sound genuine and come across as, to eventually maximize your performance from this perspective. So there you go. This is my 2 cents on whether you should make things up or not make things up in an interview, and hopefully you found this useful.